as soon as I get. Gents? 30 seconds, please, Josh. Good evening and welcome to the October 8th, 2019 Prior Lake Spring Lake Watershed District Board meeting. Our first order of business is the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. So our next item on the agenda is then the public comment. Again, this is the opportunity where we invite members of the public, if they're here, to come and speak before the board on issues that are typically not on the agenda. We don't have anybody here this evening, so I'm going to move on to the next item. But again, anybody listening at home, please come down and say hello. We'd be happy to hear from you. So then the next item on the agenda is to approve the agenda. And for this, I'm going to first of all ask my colleagues and see if staff, if there are any changes to the agenda. Gentlemen, anybody seeing any? Yep.
Mr. Chair, I want to pull something off the consent. Want me to do that now or wait till we get that?
You can wait till we get to it. Thank you. Diane?
Yes, Mr. Chair. I would like to delete an item on the agenda. And that would be 5.4, the ferric chloride carp barrier contract approval. And the reason is that we were working off of preliminary numbers, and we realized we're going to have to rebid it. So we want to have that removed. We are going to have to ask for a special meeting of 3 managers, however, to approve the revision, but at this point, we need to pull that off.
Okay, thank you. And I'm just going to clarify, because Charlie, I was going to be pulling that off too. I had one question. So maybe then we're going to, after we approve the agenda, let's at least go, I'm going to add an item. I'm going to add an item to an agenda then. Let's put that one on the agenda just so that we get the chance to ask those 2 questions, because they might feed into what you do. Mine probably doesn't, but Charlie, the engineer, might have something. So actually, I tell you what, let's just leave it there. We'll pull it off, and we're not going to vote on it then. How's that? Awesome. So we're going to leave it as is. Anybody? Seeing none, then I would entertain a motion to approve the agenda.
So moved.
We have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
We have a motion and second on the floor. All those in favor say aye. Aye. That motion carries 5-0. Thank you. So then the first item on the agenda, the next item, is a public hearing for the draft rule revision. And Diane, before we open up the public hearing, I know you've got some introductory comments that you're going to share with the purpose of this.
Mr. Chair, members of the board and public, what we have here tonight is a public hearing for revised rules for the Watershed District. The rules are an important part of the regulatory role that the Watershed District has, and the last time we had an update of the rules was 2003. We've been working on a rule update since 2017 with our partners as well as state agencies who have an interest in regulation of watershed districts. And the managers have seen several different revisions of the rules. We sent out a formal notice to our partners in the state agencies indicating to them that we are starting the 45-day comment period, and that comment period ends on October 28th. So, Mr. Chair, the public hearing tonight was primarily to have the opportunity for any of the folks that received the information to speak before you, but I don't see anyone in the audience.
Agreed, and thank you. So that's what the only other item I was going to clarify again. This was notified that we were going to have a public hearing on the rules revision, correct? Just to clarify.
That was correct, yes.
Okay, thank you. So we need to formally then open and close a public hearing, even though there is nobody here. I would then entertain a motion to open the public hearing.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second on the floor. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
That motion carries 5-0. So now I'm going to ask if there's anybody in the audience, which there isn't, that would like to speak at the public hearing. Seeing nobody here, nobody walking into the chambers at this time, then I would then entertain a motion to close the public hearing.
It's a public hearing.
Second.
We have a motion and a second on the floor. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. That motion carries. Thank you, gentlemen. So then we're on to other old new business, and we are starting with our programs and projects update.
Okay, starting off with the Prior Lake level, as we always do, the level is at 902.9. And if you look at the graph, you can see that the water level is rising steadily. And there is a reason for that. We started our bank erosion project in the Prior Lake Outlet Channel this actually yesterday. And so in order to reduce erosion and sedimentation in the outlet channel while they're doing work in the channel, we have closed the main gate of the outlet structure, and that doesn't allow any water to leave Prior Lake. So we are only closing it while they're actively working in the channel, and we are going to open it whenever they aren't working. So over the weekend, we'll open it for the weekend. We're watching to see how long it takes the water to actually get to the area that they're working. So we're gonna open the gate a full 24 hours before they're even done working in the channel, because we know that it takes some time to get down to where they're working. So we're working really, really closely with the contractor to make sure that we have the outlet structure open as much as possible. And when we do have the outlet structure open, we also have the low flow gate open as well. So we're allowing as much water as possible to leave when it is open. And this project is expected to take approximately a month or so. And even after the project is done, we're going to keep the low flow gate open until January 1st, because we are allowed to open the low flow gate during November and December when the water is high. So we are going to plan on keeping that open as long as we can. And then Spring Lake, you can see, has already peaked and will start dropping slowly. So Prior Lake should slow down on the the rise. This slide is kind of an open, just a placeholder. Mike Meiser had a question about the Spring Lake impairment. And if you wouldn't mind, Mike, repeating your question, and we can hopefully address it, because we were a little bit confused about what you were asking.
So I'm going to try and ask this, but it was actually a colleague of mine that had asked this question. Bruce, do you want to ask this? I'm going to let you, if you can remember, because some time has passed, but I'm happy to, because I remember.
Well, I guess I was asking, we have to get 2 out of the 3 standards met to get off the impairment. And the question I had asked, talking to Mike and Diane, can we retest to see, we've got more rain now and the cooler temperatures, does that improve our Secchi disc on Spring Lake? So maybe we meet that requirement. The chloroform A standard looks like we've never met that and probably never will. So we really need to concentrate on the Secchi disc. So I assume you guys are going to be testing some more in October before winter.
So maybe I should explain a little bit about how they put lakes on the impairment list. So I think you were alluding to this, where 2 out of, so if you're listed as impaired. For nutrients, that means you're not meeting two of these three standards, which is phosphorus, Secchi depth, and chlorophyll A. So what we do is we look at the average from June through September of each year. So we take all the samples that were taken during the year and average them, and that's how you get these bar graphs. And so each bar graph is the average of June through September of that year. So my confusion is when you say retest, what you mean by retesting. I don't follow what you mean by that.
I guess I didn't understand that you go from June to September and take the average. So I was thinking you took some tests in August and maybe September, but maybe at the end of September, things would get better. So
We take samples every other week. We try to get samples before the lake turns over in the spring, and then we sample every other week until the lake turns over again in the fall. So there's approximately 18 samples per year, but then we don't really use the ones that are in May and October, but they're useful just in seeing, what the water quality was during turnover, before or after.
So Jamie, I'm going to do a follow-up because I think the essence of what Bruce was asking, and I thought it was a good question worthy of trying to get some information on, is the state dictate this June to September period and the quantity of tests that we need to do within that period of time? Is there a standard upon which we're going to meet it? And the reason for the question, because if there's a standard and we're following it, great. But I think part of the driver of the question was wondering if there's freedom in this to test at times when the lake seems to be clearer, is what I think was maybe some of the reasoning behind the question, if I could. And so that's why I was trying to get us to, and help us, because I thought that'd be good for the board to make sure that we understood the process, and probably good for the public to understand the state standards on the requirements here. So with that, I'll pause.
The state standard does require at least 8 samples per monitoring season, so from June through the end of September. So you have to have at least 8, and that's a requirement. I don't believe they have a strict sampling protocol, like when that has to be, but it's definitely more scientific to do it biweekly on a set day, so you're not biasing towards
That's what I was.
storm events, or if you just don't go out when it's raining because it's not a nice day, you're maybe gonna have it look a little bit nicer, especially in the streams when it would be dirtier after a rain event or during a rain event. So yeah, we do it on a set schedule every 2 weeks, so we're not biasing the results.
Fair enough, thank you. Manager Hennis?
When you say, it isn't our people, is it?
Correct, yeah. We, in this instance, means Three Rivers Park District
That's what I
for
thought.
Spring Lake. We also have volunteers sampling some other lakes, but in this instance, it would be Three Rivers Park District.
So Jamie, I'm going to ask one more since we have this up now, and as we were just chatting about that. So as I understand these 3 charts that you have up, the only one that we have been meeting at some point in the last 3 years is at least on the total phosphorus level, correct? That we have not even met the Secchi depth requirements in the last 3 years. Well, sorry, 2016 through 2018. I don't have the 2019 numbers up, but so we are still a ways away from getting off, or from starting the process to get off the impaired list, correct?
Correct, yeah, and we did check with the MPCA to ask them what we need in order to get off the impairment list, and I'll say it's pretty gray. Like, you'll hear different things from different people, but this time, and we've heard this before, is that you need at least 2 years of data with at least 8 samples per year, and meeting the standards of 2 of these parameters, 2 of the 3 parameters. So by going with that, what they said was, just 2 years in a row of meeting the standards. But there is a best professional judgment team that would look at the data, and they would also look at this and they would say, well, it's, this is only good because you just had an alum treatment and they can see that it's trending up or trending worse after an alum treatment, so they maybe would say this doesn't look like it's sustainable, so we need more proof that it's going to stay meeting the standards. So they do take into, effect common sense when they're looking at these results. But yeah, I do know the 2019 results so far this year, we are not meeting the standard for SECI or chlorophyll again, so it's looking like another alum treatment is probably going to be what we need to get it back below, to get the SECI depth down below or meeting the standards again, or maybe the water quality will be better, next year if the weather is in our favor.
So Jamie, if I look at this graph, then thank you for that, sorry. So if I look at this graph, it would look in 2014 and 2015, if we had submitted data for those 2 years, we could have gotten at least off the impaired list, whether it would have gone back on as our SECI did not approve. Is that a fair statement, that we might have gotten it off?
Maybe if the best professional judgment team thought that it was sustainable that way, like I mentioned, they would know that we did an alum treatment, and they might say, well, we don't think it's going to stay this way unless maybe if you have I don't know. There's a lot of things that go into it, but it's potentially yes.
Okay.
But they also, they have a set schedule for analyzing the data. They don't do it every year. They're on a 10-year rotation, so if they won't look at it again until I think 2026, unless we ask them specifically to look at our data. So we can ask them to do that at any time to personally review our data. Otherwise, they'll do it on their own in 2026.
So actually, you know what, I am going to ask one more follow-up question. So we talk about the alum treatment, and I know that's the issue really with the phosphorus and binding it and dropping it down. So you're telling me, do I understand this correctly, without, it was not stated as such, but simply the alum treatment, by pulling out that phosphorus that might be in the column, as that drops out, that's going to improve the SECI DIS test, correct? Is that a fair?
That's what happened in 2013 when we did that alum treatment. So our thought is that the next time that we do an alum treatment, we'll have some sediment cores so that they can analyze what's in the lake bottom, and then we can calibrate our dosing rate, because the last time we did it, the dosing rate was in 2012, I believe, before our first alum treatment. So we would possibly increase the dosing of alum next time, because if you remember, our first dose was half of the whole dose, and then the last treatment was a quarter of the full dose, and then the third treatment, which would be our next one, would be that same quarter of the total dose. So we might want to consider increasing the dosage next time to get the SECI depth better.
Okay, thank you. Bruce?
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chair. One question for you, Jamie. This only goes to 2018. Do you have any idea where we're at for 2019?
2019 through the middle of August, we're not meeting the standard for chlorophyll or SECI, but we are meeting it for phosphorus again.
All right, thank you.
That's all we have for the programs and projects this month.
So I might talk about carp, if I might. Surprise, surprise. Yes, a couple of chuckles up here. So, I mean, I know we've got the write-up here, and I couldn't remember, I thought we had asked either at the last meeting or the meeting before to see if we could get sort of a regular presentation on the monthly basis on where we're at with respect to our accelerated carp management. I mean, in essence, and it could be just one big green light that says everything's on track. I know based on what I just read in the staff activities, I know there's a lot of background stuff that's needs to be put in place before we really go after some of the draws. So I get that, but is this stuff still all tracking then according to plan then, Maggie? And we still look like we're on target to?
Mr. Chair, managers, so the short is yes. I guess I kind of didn't put that update on this PowerPoint presentation because I'll be talking about the IPM plan later. But we are on track. We just purchased we're going to be purchasing the boat to help us out with those smaller removals and for tracking the carp on Spring Lake and Upper Pryor on days we don't have access to a boat. We've got the stationary cameras. They're going to be installed. We've been trying to train carp, which I'll talk about a little bit later. And just going around and surveying areas where we think they might be potential nursery sites. So there's a few wetlands that we're checking out so that we're all set up for the next phase of barriers. Well, you saw that we just pulled the ferric chloride barrier off the agenda, or we're going to, but that one and the Northwoods barrier will be installed. We're still working on those to be done by year end. But we're just moving forward with just about everything. There's just so many things to mention, but they're all on the screen in front of you if you want to take a look. The accelerated carp management strategies are in red. And some of those we're doing right away this year, and some of them are saved for next spring, such as like the Newman cage, the Anderson cage, box trap removals with volunteers. They're just more successful in the springtime when the fish are spawning. So, but yeah, so we're on track. We're just really busy with carp right now. And we're
Awesome.
definitely moving forward.
So I might just ask, could we get this in our regular monthly update, that graphic? And I know that you've color-coded it for different reasons, but if somehow give us some feedback whether stuff's on track, that's in essence what all I'm after is to see if all of a sudden things are starting from going green to yellow or we have some red, that we have some issues. That's sort of why I'm looking for that. So awesome. Thank you. Okay, so, Fred?
Just a couple of questions for Maggie. So on the planning, in the report, under the feasibility reports, you have nothing under last month, and then EOR will complete which 2 feasibility studies? I should know this, I'm guessing, but.
Mr. Chair, Manager Corrigan. So so you're looking in the projects and programs update, and underneath the feasibility studies, it should be the 2 that were from the Bowser grant. So that was the 2 that are, mostly paid for by the grant funding, and that's for the one on the north side of Lower Pryor Lake and for the west side of Spring Lake that EOR is going to be working on and hopefully finishing up by the end of the year.
I'm sorry?
Hopefully finishing it up by the end of the year.
Okay. And then on the regulation, it's under BMPs and easements. Yeah, there's a comment that you're working with landowners to resolve easement violations. I assume that's 2019 easement violations, and how many were there?
Mr. Chair, Manager Corrigan, so I don't have the numbers offhand. There's just a number of landowners that have pre-existing violations, or there's not that many that have new ones. They're just ones that have been old that we've been slowly working with the landowners, and we just need to get those resolved. Such as a swing set in an easement is one of them, small barrier issues. It's a variety of things, but Catherine usually does her easement report in November or December, and so she'll be bringing that to the board with the most latest information.
Okay, 3, thank you.
Thank you. So moving on to the next item on the agenda then, the bid authorization for Sutton Lake Conditional Drawdown Project.
Mr. Chair, that would be Carl Omer.
Mr. Chair, managers, we're seeking tonight authorization from the board to proceed, or at least delegate the authority to the district administrator. Proceed with bidding the project, giving conditional approval to the district administrator pending receipt of DNR final approval and execution of the easements with the 2 landowners. Most of us saw the project site yesterday, and the obvious apparent willingness of the landowner to continue with this project. So I think we're just fine there. We just need to get those final signatures and everything signed off. We're coming to you with the request for conditional approval because we'd rather not wait until the next board meeting and just have another month elapse if we can get the ball rolling in between that time. So in your packet You have what are labeled 100% draft plans. There's one final QC to go before it would go out, but there's nothing that would be of substantial change to the plans. It's just making sure that everything is exact and there's no misreferences to details or any minor inconsistencies or just additional clarification that'll help in the bidding process. Since you saw these plans last time, which were 60% plans, there hasn't been any significant change, with maybe one exception. The length of the emergency overflow weir did get longer, and that did increase the price by around $15,000. And there have been some other unit price adjustment changes that we made to that cost estimate just based on current bidding, since the last cost estimate was several months ago. I did have one call from Manager Loney today asking about, exactly why and how come so many outlet structures for this. And so maybe I'll just relay that answer that I discussed with him today. And, there is 3 structures per se. There's a base flow outlet structure, which is 2 10-inch pipes into a manhole structure with a 24-inch pipe out. That is sized based on the flow record that we have from monitoring at the culvert underneath the county road, and trying to, based on a calibrated model for that upper watershed, just drainage area to Sutton Lake, an average sort of base flow on any given year to the best of our ability with the information at hand. So we're wanting to pass that flow through the system pretty much all the time through the new control structure. And then when rainfalls occur and larger events occur, we're managing the water levels and bouncing it behind the berm. And that's up to the 100-year event. And then we have another structure, which is the weir, and that's to convey events larger than the 100-year event in a safe manner across that earthen berm. And then finally, which we don't have approval to use yet, but that we still need that capacity anyways, is the secondary or the drawdown structure. And given the intent to still be able to draw down and pursue that option, we would need that extra capacity in the secondary outlet structure to draw down the lake from the max storage down to the limited storage in a reasonable time frame. You can't achieve it just in the one single 24-inch pipe. So that's why there's a second outlet structure, which brings us the ability to draw down the lake in a period of about 2 to 3 weeks from a max elevation down to that lowest potential elevation that we could control it to. That's the reason why the multiple structures are simply because we can't really go beyond much more than a 24-inch outlet pipe, given the control elevations that we have to work with. Your ground elevation out there is 939, and you have a 936 on the downstream end, and you only have a berm that's going to be as high as 942. You've got to fit your pipe and sufficient cover within that area. So additional capacity means additional smaller pipes. So that's kind of why the background and the why to the number of pipes. So, questions?
Thank you, Carl. Gentlemen, Bruce, you're up.
Just one question. If we approve this project tonight, do you have a timeline of bidding and construction?
Mr. Chair, Manager Loney, the intent would be, as soon as we have easements signed, to solicit bids. Our intent with the schedule that we provided you, excuse me, at a previous board meeting was to be going out for bid before end of year.
Fred, I think you were next.
Thank you, Mr. President. We had a discussion about construction contingencies or contingencies generally. Does this apply here as well? We had kind of talked about we thought we have enough reserve funds that we didn't need to be necessarily planning for contingencies, but I'm not sure if that applied to projects. I assume it did.
Mr. Chair, Manager Corn, and I'm not sure I was privy to that discussion, but this was just a recommendation. The engineer's estimate of probable costs has been updated to $285,000. And our recommendation would be just to plan, because that's an estimate. And this is your call, whether you want to or not, for an additional 10% just in your budgeting process. Or if you have it in reserve and can manage accordingly, then you don't need to be thinking about that recommendation.
So Fred, go ahead. You want to clarify? So I have this, it does, right, both on the initial memo and also then in the financial budget, shows a 10% construction contingency.
Right, so help me, how does the bid process work? Is that included in the bid process, that the contract can go up to that amount of money?
Manager Corrigan and managers, that would not be something that is included in the solicitation for bids for contractors. That's just a planning recommendation for yourselves, whether you choose to consider that or not. That is not something that is like a line item in the RFP to the contractor.
It's the estimate, your estimate of
Right.
what this should cost, plus you're adding in a contingency to give us an indication of what we think this project might come in at, correct?
Yep.
And then it'll go out for bid, we'll get some numbers back, and we'll make a decision whether we move forward with that, correct?
Correct.
Clarify, that's my understanding of the
Correct.
process. So I think, so we're gonna end up having a final say, Fred, on this.
No, I understand that. I just,
so-
it appeared to me from the discussion we had before, then we're looking for bids at 284 or less, ideally. Is that right?
Correct.
And then for budgeting purposes, we might take that into account, but fund that from other resources. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? I don't have any, so it's just a statement of support for the project to move it forward, so I will be supportive. Anybody else? So then I would then entertain a motion.
So moved.
We want to make a motion to approve, how do we want to state this here? Approving authorization to solicit bids for construction for the Sutton Lake Outlet Structure Project.
Second.
We have a motion and a second on the floor. I'm assuming there's no further questions. Seeing none, I would then, all those in favor, say aye. Aye. That motion carries 5-0. Thank you, everybody. So the next item on our agenda is the Healthcare Savings Plan authorization. Diane?
Mr. Chair and managers, the Healthcare Savings Plan is a program that the staff has asked that the district put in place. And what it is, it's an individual tax-free account that allows public employees to invest their own money into an account that is tax-free. So for instance, if once you leave the district employment, that if you have a medical bill, you can use the money in that tax-free account to pay for that medical bill. The only position that the district would have is to help administer it. So it's basically making sure that the money is taken out of an employee's account every month. The standards are really strict. We have to all be in the plan or we can't have it. And so what the staff agreed to do was that on page 2 it says employees with 0 to 3 years of service don't have to contribute anything. Employees with 3 to 5 years of service would contribute about 0.5% of their pay, and employees of 5 or more years contribute 1% of their pay. So also that when an employee would leave, they would donate about 50% of the remaining paid time off upon termination of their employment into this account. So again, it's not getting actual cash dollars, it's actually putting it into the healthcare savings plan. So what we're asking for is the approval of this so that we can set it up for our employees. There is no contribution from the district on this.
Thank you, Diane. So questions, Kurt?
My microphone's all messed up. Does ADP, are they going to do the deduction then?
I believe what happens is that Amy has to tell ADP what to do, but then it will be done
Right.
that way, yes.
Right. And then, I know we had this with the Postal Service.
Oh.
If at the end of a year you haven't used all the money, it's use it or lose it, right?
No, it accrues. And you can invest it according to several different plans, options that they have.
What do you mean by it's approved? What is
It's
it?
accrued.
Oh, it accrues?
Yeah, so it doesn't go away. It's accrued,
Really?
yes.
And if, when they leave, that money is theirs,
Yeah, in the health savings account, it goes with them,
who's doing the investing?
the employees. So it's 100% employee money.
That is interesting. Then it's not the same as we had.
Bruce?
Mr. Chair, yeah, I have that plan. Being a former city employee, it's a great plan. Good investments. It really works well. So, I mean, I'm sure the employees are in favor of it too, because it's tax-free, comes out tax-free, and you can invest it, and it's a great program. So I'd
Thank
be
you.
supportive.
Fred?
So I'm sorry, it sounded like individual employees are managing the investment?
That's correct. It is their money to invest.
I'm probably just not seeing this, but employees shall contributing an ongoing percent of pay as described below. Is it, so the employees with 0 to 3 years of service shall contribute 0% of pay or more?
No, they don't have to contribute to
I
it.
know you don't have to, but can you?
I don't believe so.
So the first 3 you pay 0,
Yes,
the next 2 you pay 0.5% of
Right.
pay, and then after that you pay 1% of your
correct.
pay. And then you shall, so you must, is that a must 50% of your remaining paid off?
Yes, and it says specifically remaining.
Yes.
So if people have used up their vacation, there's nothing to contribute.
Yep. Thank you.
So I'm going to follow up one, and I may have already heard it with Fred's question, but I want to do a clarification because in the write-up it wasn't listed, but when you're verbally were introducing this, you said it is all employees must participate in the plan. Is that correct? I'm seeing the head nods. That's
Yeah, so I know, and it's kind of, you wonder, well, wait a minute, if people from up to 3 years don't have to contribute, aren't they really considered part of the plan? Yes, they're following this protocol. So once they hit, over 3 years of employment, then they're on this track.
so again, it's a must.
It's a
and there's
must.
no way to contribute more than above this.
No.
This is it. That's the max.
That's right.
Okay, thanks. Two other things. First of all, do we have any employees with significant PTO that's been banked?
We have, in our employee plan, we allow up to, I can't remember, I think it's, I want to say 300 hours total. There is a cap.
Oh, that's-
So you have to, it is a use it or lose it type of thing with that. So if you don't use it, you can't keep it. You have to, there's a maximum of hours that you can have in your bank, so to
But you're
speak.
thinking it's a potentially upwards of a 300,
I think it's about 300, right?
300 hours, but that's pretty significant then.
Yes.
Okay, because I know that the city previously had gotten into some situations where there was serious banking going on, and then this could be a significant hit. And so that's why I ended up,
Oh.
thought, well, that's what made me
Sure,
ask the
yeah.
question. But,
No, we
Okay.
talked about that in 2015 and dealt with it that way.
okay, thank you. So then the last thing, so this does seem great for staff. Why did we wait so long?
We didn't know it
Who
existed.
thought about it?
Well, we actually had the State Retirement Service come in and talk to us, and they mentioned that this is one of the programs, so we didn't
Awesome.
know it.
Well, I'm glad. I'm very supportive. I'm glad you guys are going to get this. I think it's a no-brainer. I'm sorry there isn't an opportunity for you to contribute more if you so desire. Just because this stuff is, speaking of increasing costs, as we had talked in the workshop, this is one that everyone knows is going up significantly.
Yes,
So it's great that
absolutely.
you have this.
Thank you.
So I'm supportive. Charlie, did you have any questions?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Well, I did. I think you all asked all my questions. I just want to make sure that all of our current employees are in agreement.
Yes, Mr.
Okay.
Chair, Manager Holly, they are.
And when we hire new employees, if and when in the future, we need to make sure that they're aware of this. This is a mandate to them that they have to take this out of their money. They don't get a choice. So just for that reason alone, it's kind of like, whoa, be careful. So I don't know, it's fine by me.
Thank you then, gentlemen. I would entertain a motion. Somebody make a motion to approve. I don't see any language here. Go for it, Bruce.
Well, do we need to,
Yep, come up with some language to
language?
approve the healthcare savings.
I would approve the healthcare savings plan as presented by staff for approval.
Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second on the floor. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
That motion carries 5-0. Thank you, everybody. So the next item on the agenda is my current favorite, the Integrated Pest Management Plan for Common Carp. Maggie, I trust this is yours.
Mr. Chair, managers, thanks, Mike. So we've been talking about carp all year, and you guys have reviewed like a bunch of different things. When we got the Bowser grant, we had to do that feasibility study in order to get the work plan approved, and so that one was the really large one that was 80-some pages long that we dove really deep into each water body that we were going to manage. And then last June, we had talked to you guys about what the prior plan looked like. That's when Tony Havranek from WSB came in. And he talked about all the different components to the plan. And he also talked about all the different strategies that we use. And that's when the board brought up, can we do more? And so we set the ambitious goal, and we also started doing those accelerated carp management strategies in result of that meeting. And so as we developed those and you guys approved those at the August meeting, we've also been working on going back to update this plan. So this plan was originally approved by the board in 2017 after we started with that Minnesota Pollution Control Agency grant. This was towards the end of that grant where we just wanted to have a plan in place to carry us through past that grant. And this includes all of the different strategies that we use to manage carp. It prioritizes the water bodies that we do that on. And it gives us a really good game plan. So some of the things that we're going to update in the 2019 plan, things that you going to see that are going to be different, is that we're going to clearly identify those carp management water bodies. Since we had that in the feasibility study and it was such a useful tool, we took out our favorite pieces from that and put it into this plan just for reference. And so we have 14 lakes in the watershed district, but we don't need to necessarily do carp management on all of those because we just don't have the resources at this point, and it's a lot of work. So we're trying to prioritize those into carp management water bodies. We also set goals for this plan. So based on what we heard from you last June, we know that Upper Prior Lake and Spring Lake are our top priorities, and we wanted to identify that in this plan. We also incorporated some of those strategies that we talked about, those accelerated carp management strategies. And then one of the things that was missing from the past version of this plan was a schedule. So we can see, have we gotten it done? Are we doing our job? So, like I said, we have 14 lakes in the watershed, and we're only managing carp on 8 of those. So this is what we talked about in the Bowser grant, and this is all the connected water bodies. So while Sutton and Swamp Lake are connected through Ditch 13, we don't anticipate that those are contributing large amounts of carp to the system, because carp are looking for those wetland areas that they can reproduce in. So our focus for this study is on buck and fish. That's on the top of the watershed. And then, of course, those flow into Spring Lake, Upper Prior. Arctic Lake feeds into Upper Prior. Lower Prior Lake's connected. And then we're hitting Jeffers and Pike Lake because of the TMDL on Pike Lake. And because we want to see how many carp are leaving through that outlet structure and going downstream. All of this stuff is connected, and it's important to understand how it all works together in order to manage it effectively. But out of those 8, there are priority goals, of course. So in our main focus in the next year, hopefully, but we're setting this as part of a 3-year goal, but our true goal is to get this done by the end of 2020, is to get Upper Prior Lake and Spring Lake back to that below 30 kilograms per hectare on both of those lakes. That's our water quality goal. So the state's goal is below 100, but if you get to below 30, you're also going to see that aquatic plant community come back, and you're going to see a lot of more abundant water quality goals reached. So, and then part of that too is to block those spawning areas. So I'm sure you guys have perused the plan and you've seen there's a rebound in Spring Lake after those removals. A lot of those little guys are coming back because we have not sufficiently blocked off those spawning areas. So that's a huge 3-year goal, is to identify those and block all of those off that we can. And then to get baseline fisheries information to understand the system, so we're putting the dollars where they're going to be most effective. So with that, with our IPM plan, we have 6 different components kind of working in harmony to effectively control carp. These little circles that you see on the screen are kind of prioritized based on size. So the most that we can get the most bang for the buck on is the physical removal. And with those, we're adding all those accelerated carp management strategies. Before, we were just kind of doing seines and electrofishing. And in this accelerated plan, we have spawning traps, just specialized trap nets that'll catch those carp when they're spawning. We're doing baited traps. We're herding with and training those carp with noise and bait. The next largest is the data gathering analysis. We need to keep on gathering information on these water bodies to see where we're at, if we've met our goals, if we're maintaining them. It's really important to know the most information about the system and to get it figured out. The next biggest circle is the carp barriers. We need to block off those spawning grounds. And then there's biological controls, working with those bluegills. And then, of course, education, making sure that people know about carp and the aquatic plant rebound that we're going to have, and that they're going to be supportive of these things. And the very smallest one is chemical controls, which we're not really doing at this point, but we're keeping it in our back pocket just in case we find some spawning ground that would be the best tool to use. So I kept some of these slides on from when Tony talked about them last June. So these slides are kind of repeats from the last presentation. But I kept them in here in case you had any questions about these. And I'm just going to briefly go through them because you kind of heard the spiel before. So the tracking that we do, we're using it to develop those population estimates on these water bodies. We're collecting spatial data, where the carp are going, when they're aggregating, so we can get the most bang for the buck out of these seines. And through doing that, we're using pit tags. So the pit tags are the cheaper ones. They're the small little tags that we put into the carp. They're about $2 each. And they're really great for seeing where they're going through channels. We can put receivers, and they're stationary. So they're always collecting data. Whenever a carp goes through one of those channels, we're getting feedback on which carp went through that channel. And when we tag these carp, we're collecting measurement data. So we're weighing it, we're measuring it, seeing how big it is, so we know exactly which carp is going through there. And then there's the radio tags, which we can use to actively locate the carp. This is great for seines because you can see firsthand by triangulating their positions where exactly they're hanging out. These are the more expensive tags, the ones that are $300. The ones that we have on the public landing signs that says, if you find these, please bring them back because they're expensive. But they only last like about 2 to 3 years, so we're constantly putting more and more radio tags in these guys over time. And then the physical removals. So our goal, like I said before, is to get Spring and Upper Prior Lake down to 30 pounds per acre. Once we achieve that goal, we'll start focusing on removals on other water bodies. And that's not to say that other removals aren't happening. SMSC is actively managing Arctic Lake. We are a partner in that. We're helping them with data and small things that they need, but they're in charge of that. And they're also starting a program on Pike Lake, which again, we will partner in as needed, but they're the lead on that lake. And our main goal is Spring and Upper Prior. And so our current methods, like I said before, are seine netting. We have used gill nets over in the Arctic Lake outlet and electrofishing. But these new innovative methods that we're using, it's the baited box traps. So that's something that we're going to start next spring, which is setting down a box trap and then baiting it consistently with help from volunteers until we get a large enough carp group there. And then we pull up the sides of it and trap them all. This is something that you probably saw in the news, like Minnehaha Creek Watershed does this on Lake Minnetonka. And And we're also going to use specialized trap nets. These are something that both our scientists at WSB as well as Jeff Anderson, one of our staff here at the watershed, have come up with. They are very familiar with carp and activities and what they do, and we're making up 2 innovative new designs to hopefully monopolize on their spawning behavior. And then just training carp. Like right now, if you're in Mud Bay or on the north side of Upper Pryor, you are probably going to get a mailer soon asking for help on training carp with noise and bait to try to get them to come where we want them so we can remove them from the lakes. And that's one of the things that we're trying. We're also going to use those same speakers to scare them out of the Knotty Oar area where they congregated last winter and we weren't able to get a successful removal. So we can also use that noise for that purpose as well, and herding them in open water as well as under the ice. So hopefully that'll be really effective. And then the bluegill population. So there is bluegills that survive in these wetland spawning areas if it doesn't freeze really hard. If the oxygen levels go low enough in these areas, which happens a lot, the bluegills die, and they're great predators of carp eggs. And so we really love them. And so we're going to put a whole stock of them in the Geist wetland to eat the carp that may be still in there reproducing. And then we're going to use this as a tool once we establish that that is a really effective tool in other places that we deem worthy. Like I said, we have this chemical control option, but it's a last resort, truly. We considered using it in the 1217 wetland until we pretty sure they died off last winter. And then education, we're going to continue to educate people. This is part of the grant requirements that we get from the state, so we're going to continue to educate and again try to get some support around those aquatic plants that are going to rebound when the carp leave. Barriers. So, right now we've got the Fremont barrier on the Arctic Lake outlet. We've got the barriers on 1217. We do have the ferric chloride barrier, but it's broken, so we're going to be fixing that soon. We've got that drum barrier on the Deestill Pond, and we're working on installing that Northwood Pond barrier. Those are all the barriers that we have currently, but we're also working on, like I said, looking at some of those wetland connections on Spring Lake and Upper Pryor to see if there's other barriers that might be necessary. And we're just tracking carp population trends, and we're going to be updating that IPM plan regularly. So next year, we were doing it every spring, which is always kind of crazy because it's really busy with carp season. So I think now that we've kind of stretched this IPM plan update until the fall, I think we might keep it on a fall annual update basis just to keep it more consistent and regular and give us a lot of time to process that information from removals in the spring. So every year we'll be coming back to you, getting it updated. And then so also in the IPM plan, we added a schedule. And so this was just the schedule that we came up with for the next 3 years. The ones in the gray are the ones that we've done. Because we've been so busy, especially with these accelerated carp management strategies, we haven't done much with education outreach yet. I'm really sad about that, so I left it purple. But that was what we were planning on doing. It's kind of being pushed more into the fall. But everything in gray is stuff that we've done, we've completed, and we're moving forward. Yeah, and so with that long spiel, that was kind of a summary of the 2019 plan and the updates. But I would welcome any questions. The requested action on this is to either make a motion to approve this 2019 plan or to let us know if you have any changes, and we'll make those updates and bring it back for approval at the November board meeting.
Great. Thank you, Maggie. Kurt, you're up.
How many radio tag carp do we have in Upper Pryor, Mud Bay, and how many in Spring Lake currently? And what's the future plan of adding more?
Mr. Chair, Manager Hennis, so on page, let me see if I can find it. On page 22 of the IPM plan, so in Upper Pryor Lake, we just put 9 more tags in in these past few months. Sure. So we have 12 radio tags currently, and then in 2020, we're going to put some more in. Although actually I don't have the Spring Lake ones on here. We plan on putting 10 more, sorry, this was an error which I will update before we finalize it. They're supposed to be not active. So all the ones that we did have in there died off with like the last grant. So we're gonna put 10 more in before this winter. WSB will be in there later this month to get that completed, as well as updating the current population estimate. But yeah, I don't know why that was missed.
Anybody else, gentlemen? Because I'm gonna, Fred?
So this is kind of a general question. On page 12, there's discussion about TMDL reports. And I just
Mr. Chair, Manager Corrigan, could you speak into the mic? Thank you.
thought it was. On page 12, there's a part 4 priority lakes. There's a comment about Pike Lake and Fish Lake TMDL reports are currently in progress, and maybe this is for Diane. I've heard this for a while. We don't see any progress on it. Have we had reports about the progress on those?
Mr. Chair, Manager Corrigan, what happened is staff retired from the Pollution Control Agency. So they're supposed to be working on an implementation plan that they'll meet with us on and that we'll work together on it. But we haven't seen any movement in that. The 2 TMDLs have been included in the Lower Minnesota RAPS, is what it's called. And so we do know of the impairments, but it's actually putting the plan together to deal with those impairments. We haven't even started.
So is this statement not correct? Should it be updated or corrected, or just to reflect what you just said?
Mr. Chair, Manager Corrigan, yeah, I can update that.
So obviously I'm looking after my favorite orphan lake, which is Pike Lake, which, and in this, and I noticed you had a comment about aeration in some of these lakes as well. What's the criteria for putting an aerator in the lakes? Because there is some, I mean, I think I sent you pictures of bass that are being caught in that lake, and I don't know about bluegills, but there is some activity going on in that lake.
Mr. Chair, Manager Corrigan, so an aerator is just really expensive. So, and the reason you put that in is that the bluegill have oxygen to survive. So we could definitely consider that if we keep on restocking a certain water body and it's more effective or more cost effective to put in an aerator. But we kind of explored that a little bit with WSB and some other watersheds, and it just sounds really expensive.
Thank you. Anybody else? Bruce?
Just question Maggie on, I know she had a list of barriers for various areas like Arctic Lake and others. Are there some shallow areas, like I'm thinking of Mud Bay and other areas in the lakes that are spawning areas that we know of? And what can we do there?
Mr. Chair, Manager Loney, so in those areas like Mud Bay, we've been trying to monopolize on that. Last spring we did those seines over there. We didn't grab a lot of carp, but it's kind of nice to have those. And as far as the smaller ones, we're identifying other wetland areas that are connected where we could potentially do barriers. But in the open water, typically carp are more susceptible to bluegill predation just because it's open water versus those shallower wetlands.
With one more follow-up question, bluegills, how many can we get and when can we get them?
Mr. Chair, Manager Loney, so WSB is coordinating that. They're already kind of talking to our local fisheries guy from the DNR about that and how to do that. So the stocking rate that they suggest is 500 bluegill per acre. So we're going to be stocking at that rate. There are existing bluegill in like the Geist wetland, for example, but we're going to be kind of doing a quick preliminary fisheries assessment and then stocking it to that 500 level, just to make sure we have enough in there to predate on those carp. Where they get them, though, there's a bunch of different fisheries around. I'm not sure which one they're planning on, though.
Thank you. Charlie. Nothing. I had two questions, Maggie. And the first one is really just so again, first of all, actually, I think this looks great. I'm a fan of the report, and that's why I probably just have two questions. And the first one is on page 4, where you're talking about the Spring Lake population estimate from 2017 to 2019. I recall in either the last meeting or the one before that even, so 1 or 2 meetings ago, I remember seeing an increase in the Spring Lake population. I didn't think it had reached this point. So I don't know, are these newer estimates based on some other math? I see there's a couple of different approaches that this seems to have gone up that significantly. And or then also, just because it dovetails into it, Manager Hennis, as he was talking about the radio tags, and I know that we had suspected that that population was going up because there was some movement maybe from Upper into Spring. So can you comment maybe on the new numbers, and did we have radio tags suggesting those carp were moving into Spring?
Mr. Chair, managers, so these population estimates, there's not showing the confidence interval on these. So with these CPUE efforts, which is the catch per unit effort, it's basically WSB just taking a boat and going along with an electrofishing boat and seeing what they catch, and then measuring how far they go and seeing how many they catch per effort. It's not incredibly accurate. One of the things that WSB, as well as the watershed district, struggles with is how you account for the movement between water bodies. They put some radio tags in Arctic Lake. They put 4 radio tags over there. SMSC did. They're not there anymore. We blocked off that culvert, but they're gone. 2 of them were in Spring Lake. So there's connections between these water bodies that we're not even aware of.
Oh.
And with Upper Prior Lake, we have that pit tag station between those 2 water bodies. We know they're going between those. We also know they're going up to Geis, and some of them aren't coming out yet. So there's all this movement between these different water bodies, and these CPU estimates are based on a contained system. We don't have that. We've got this migratory system that carp are traveling in and out and around. And so these CPU estimates are not incredibly accurate, but the marker capture estimates are usually pretty good. If you're gonna put your money towards a estimate, I go for that 24.5, where we captured 1,700 carp, and some of those were tagged, and that's a good solid estimate. But again, it's based on this contained system.
Yep.
Estimate. So when we talked about 90 last spring, we were kind of looking at a few CPUEs. It had like a 50% confidence interval. So we were like, well, on the low end of that, it's 90, and we're just not confident. So we use the lower number there. But truly, if we're going to the middle, like the median number, it is the 190. And then we waited to confirm that through estimates this summer, which shows it now at 266. But again, there's a really large confidence interval on there. So until we get a marker capture, we won't know for sure.
So this chart is having a couple of different methods of calculation. Is that then what I'm hearing? Because it might be nice to either note that or have a separate line item separating these two, right? Do you understand why the confusion seeing that? Then the other thing you just got me thinking about, so I know the advantage of the radio tags, because then we can set some specific radio receiving stations at our current understanding of where they might go, but clearly they're getting there some other way. Are there GIS tags that are cost effective for us to find out what these other paths are? With a couple of these creatures that have moved, could we go catch them and install a GPS on a few of those to go find out what paths they're using? Because that might teach us something.
Mr. Chair, managers, so we've looked into that. They're called acoustic tags. You can put up different stations around the different water bodies to kind of see exactly where they're going. It sends like a receiver information back every minute or so, or how often you set it. It's really expensive. So we haven't set up or looked into that system. It was going to be upwards of 80,000 or something insane like that. So we're like, well, let's stick with this lower level radio tag system and go from there. We might get to that someday, but right now it's just
maybe
too
we can
expensive.
just give them an Apple Watch and use the find feature Sometimes technology, you never know, but it's kind of shocking to me that in an enclosed basin like Arctic with barriers, these things are still finding their way into spring. That's kind of shocking to me, unless somebody's picking them up and removing them. Anyway, I mean, I don't know the answer, but literally sometimes there are some solutions out there that are a little on the crazy side, but so. So then the only other question I had then, or maybe it's a comment, was on page 13, 4.2, the goals. Now I recall when we were setting up our accelerated carp management plan that our goal to get to the 30 kilograms per hectare was 1 year. Now I know it's the goal, to be clear, it's a goal, and then we do maintenance after that. So how is this now a 3-year goal?
Mr. Chair, if you read the first sentence of the following paragraph, it notes that as a shorter-term goal, the district will be aiming to have both Upper Prior Lake and Spring Lake to management levels by the end of 2020. I wanted to have those 3-year goals in there, though, just because I like looking at the larger picture. But yes, I can highlight that, though, and put it at the top.
Awesome. That's it. Thank you. This looks great, Maggie. No other questions, and I would entertain a motion to approve the Integrated Pest Management Plan for Common Carp, updated 2019.
Motion to improve the Integrated Pest Management Plan.
Second.
We have a motion and a second on the floor. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. That motion carries 5-0. Thank you, everybody. So the next item on the agenda is the consent agenda. So typically, again, this is reserved for the items that we'll just approve at will, unless somebody wants to pull something off. And we know that already, I'm just going to add it. We're going to pull off the ferric chloride carp barrier contract approval for a couple of questions, and then it's not going to go back on for a vote. Is there anything else? Any manager wanted anything else removed from the consent agenda? Seeing none, then I would entertain a motion to approve the amended consent agenda.
Motion to approve the amended consent agenda, absent 5.4.
I need a second.
Second?
We have motion and second on the floor. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. That motion carries 5-0. Thank you. Charlie, I'm going to let you go first. You've probably got some deeper questions than I as well.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I find my notes here.
Tell you what, Charlie, I'll go first because mine was kind of an easy one. So Maggie, I saw something that I think this is yours, wasn't it? Yeah, Maggie. So on page 107 of our package, the memorandum, the bottom paragraph, I just wanted to get a clarification. It said the plans, let's see, no, where is the ramp? The new design is similar to the existing structure, but includes longer fins that form a ramp and require carp to swim longer distances upstream outside of the water column. Can you clarify what that is? I think I get the essence of what it is, but could somebody just tell me what that is, please?
Mr. Chair, managers, so, gosh, I wish I had a whiteboard. I'm better working visually, as you all know.
Yeah,
So currently, they just kind of, the tines that are connected to the system just kind of open and close. And when we were talking about long-term maintenance of the system and how debris can get trapped, Tony and Mary had come up with a system where the tines are really long. So like if this was the water level and this is the top of the carp barrier, like the tines would go down really, really far. So that would allow, like if there is debris coming over the weir, to go all the way down and not get clogged. But at the same time, carp can't jump that far. And if they do try to get closer and go underneath that, they're going to be blocked by those barriers. So it was this really slick design that was going to be
I get it.
huge
Thank
improvement.
you. Nice job on the visualization. Go ahead, Charlie.
All right, thank you. Found my notes. So I had a couple questions on the agreement between us and the contractor. And then I had a couple questions on their quote. But you're saying it's going to go out and get recoded anyways for some technical reason, or?
It's, we're going to rebid this project.
Okay. So I guess maybe a lot of these don't apply, but for the agreement itself, the plans, I think, needed to be labeled Exhibit A, and their quote needed to be labeled Exhibit B, because that's how they're labeled in the contract. The plans, these plans are not signed by an engineer, and they have WSB's old logo, and we were going to bid and construct something off of these, which I have a hard time digesting. So if we're going to rebid it, maybe we should get some signed plans. On the quote that the Benson Metals gave us, they had a unit price, but it looks like a lump sum to me. There's no units really for anything here. And our agreement was to pay them based on unit pricing. So I'm not so sure that they bid it correctly. They said they needed an estimated lead time of 3 weeks for shop drawing approval, but we wanted the project done by Halloween. So I don't know how they would have gotten this done in 2 days of construction. They wanted half down on placement of the order. They had prices valid 30 days from the data quote. So none of these should be acceptable to us as part of a quote. In the agreement itself, this sentence confuses me. In the first paragraph, it says, this agreement also confers certain benefits on the WSB and Associates, the engineer. Are we making them party to agreement that they're not signing? I don't know that we can do that, nor they would accept that. So I just had a lot of issues with this, but if it's getting rebid, maybe we can clean some of this up.
Mr. Chair, Manager Howley. Manager Howley, you always catch everything where I'm like, oh, I don't know if I should put this through. When we were at our staff meeting on Tuesday, we were talking about projects coming up, and this was one of them. And I immediately realized it was going to be over 35,000 or likely, and that we have a policy that says anything over 25 has got to be approved by the board. And if I didn't get something in this month, it wouldn't get done for the year because of ground freeze. So I was kind of at a scramble due to all the other stuff that we're doing. I kind of dropped the ball on this one. So I had gotten that bid, or 2 bids from WSB right before the board packet went out, and I threw that together so fast, and which you all know is not my style. So yes, definitely, a lot of these details got missed, and because this is kind of like a different project than a typical construction project, we need a fabricator, we need something really specialized. It was done differently, but now we're kind of going back to the drawing board on it because we saw the same errors and bad stuff that you did. So we're having an engineer draw up something more like EOR does for us, with like a typical quote sheet and more specifications and direction for the contractor. So you always catch everything that is in my head, and yeah, you definitely did it on this one too. But the next version will definitely be a lot more polished and better, and we, again, are still trying to aim for the end of the year. It's a very ambitious at this point, but we want to do it right, so that's why we were pulling it.
Thank you, Maggie.
Good, thank you. I would like to say I'm looking forward to getting this done, because it's a huge thing in our carp deal. And it's a little unsafe, as we all noticed yesterday. I think it's needs some updating. So I'm very supportive of the project, so let's make it
Great.
happen.
Thank you, Fred.
And this might be in the plan, but when we were on the catwalk yesterday, Charlie and I talked about perhaps there should be a railing on both sides. I don't know whether the plan talked about replacing the railing. I don't know whether it was clear that it was going to provide a railing on both sides. But so if that's something you can get done, that would be great.
Mr. Chair, Manager Corrigan, so we still kept it open on one of the sides just because we need to access that for removing all the debris. So, but
Can that side be removable? I mean, they really
we did
shouldn't have-
talk about that at one point. I think it was a price
Probably
point
should-
on that one, but if that's the direction of the board, though, which we would probably agree with, we can just get that built into the plan since we're rebidding it anyway.
Who else does go on that catwalk outside of staff? Anybody? Yeah, perhaps. Sure, of course they do. Okay. I'd be supportive of ensuring that it's done safely. Anyone else? Your support for that, Bruce? Because they're looking for some direction from the board. Yeah. Yes. Kurt? We're going to do this informally here.
How much more are we looking at?
That's what they'll have to find out. But they can put it on, see what the bids come in. Charlie, you're supportive, I'm gathering, so, okay. All right, next item on the agenda is the treasurer's report. Charlie, you're back up again, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So this was emailed out. I think Amy did it Friday. It was my report and Chris's summary. Chris's summary quickly shows you that overall, just for the district, we're 31% spent through the end of September. However, realizing that our budget number shouldn't include that $600,000 for the Allen project, we obviously didn't do. It's more like 46% spent of our, I guess, revised budget. So we're tracking well under our budget. To the overall report, you can see the balances in the checking account and our securities. In the securities, we had two securities come up for renewal this last month, and we re-upped for a couple others. The interest rates have gone down about 0.25% since the last time we were through there, or almost 0.75%, but we staggered them on a ladder. So you can see upcoming we'll have one due in January, one in February, then July and October. Point being, we'll just keep renewing those for the best rates unless we need the money, but it doesn't appear that we do right now. So I've revised this report a little bit. You'll see that not only do I just say kind of, here's our current cash, but here's how much we're still going to get from the county, from our property levy. And so in theory, in 2019, that bold number at the top is the money on hand. Based on our previous discussions, we know that the money we have on hand, some of it isn't ours. It's the PLOC money, and there's reserve accounts and things like that. So that next section is all of the accounts pulled from Chris's report that he shared with us at the workshop last month. Again, and these are all based on the audited report from 2018. So when you say, okay, this is money that we can't spend, we don't have the ability to spend, it's saved, we have this number 1.2, that's the 860 that we can't spend. And then we say, okay, in 2019, we still have a bunch of budget left. Let's say, boom, we spend it all. Everything in our budget, that's the 1.2 we have left. Then you add those two numbers and subtract it from our funds, our surplus. This is what everybody's trying to get at, is our surplus is that 567 number. So that's what we have above and beyond any reserves, any projects we have, anything budgeted this year that we can use at any time, right? So in the future, if we've already done it this year, for next year we have a levy set and we have a budget. And then we had some reserve funding. In the future, if we didn't want to go with as high of a levy, we could then make the decision, say, okay, let's pull another X amount of reserves, or let's keep our levy here and build up our reserves. So I think I've been on this board now, 5 years, and I've finally gotten to the point where I've always wanted to get to, or to understand this. And it's taken a long time, and appreciate all the help of Diane and Chris in getting me there. So this also does not include any money coming from FEMA for reimbursement, right? That hasn't been deposited yet, unless I missed it.
No, Mr. Chair, Manager Howley, but I have good news on that.
Okay.
Last week I met with Wayne Lamoureux with Homeland Security, and he is going to approve a closeout on projects with the exception of the bank erosion project. So there have just been a lot of problems with our weather this year, and they are incredibly short-staffed. So But we should expect to receive those monies this year, which will be lovely.
Yeah.
And then I'll also be putting in invoices for engineering and contractor bills as we get them. But as Jamie said earlier, we hope to be done with this bank erosion project by the end of the year. So we'll be closing this out really soon.
And what's the total of those dollars you expect before the bank erosion? You said you expect to have a payment.
Yes, Mr. Chair, Manager Corrigan, I would say probably about 400,000.
Boy, those carp are in trouble.
So Charlie, so a couple of things that you may not have noticed. Of course, you had some, there's strong interest in this board from also seeing this new treasurer's report that you put together. And so thank you, it looks great. But the other thing is you're the treasurer. So you were given, have you been the treasurer before, Charlie?
No.
Nope, see, you've been asking 5 years. Look, all we had to do is put you in the position and we get this result.
Exactly. Don't comment on a couple spelling errors I had in there, please. Thank you.
Seeing no questions, then we're going to move on to manager's presentation.
I do have a question.
Yep, go ahead.
The watershed district cost analysis, Charlie, and maybe this is for Diane. Charlie and I have been questioning what, under the consultants, it talks about an approximate $30,000 threshold. What does that mean? And this is in the cost analysis.
Yeah, Chris Shadow's dashboard report.
Maybe you could get Chris to tell you what it
Mr. Chair, Manager Corrigan, I don't understand that either, so I'll find out.
Yeah, I have a question there too, but I think we have some other questions. We've just started to try and do some new financial reports for us. And Charlie brought some up in some ideas, as concepts or questions up in the workshop. I think we're going to put this on a workshop agenda so we can kind of go after some of the reporting. So we'll dig in then, but it's a good question, Fred. So then we're on to the manager presentations on the watershed related issues. Looks like Charlie, you're up first.
Sure. We went to, what the heck was it? The governance, we're calling it the governance. Minnesota Association of Soil Water Conservation Districts and the Minnesota Association of Watershed Districts Governance Conference 101. Was that a couple weeks ago? A couple takeaways I wanted to share, and number one is a big one. What is our role in groundwater? And I asked a very pointed question to, it was the attorney up there, and he says, well, your true role is to follow the county's groundwater plan. Scott County does not have one. Only 2 counties do, Carver and Washington, but Dakota is working on one. Manager Loney said, well, he helped draft one for the Scott County. It just didn't go anywhere. So it's sitting on somebody's desk somewhere. So, so that's our role. That's our true role. So it would be good to kind of needle the county, whoever that may be, who's responsible for that, to say, hey, finish your plan so we know what we need to do. But it doesn't sound like our duties are great. He basically said our exposure is low for anything. Like if there was an issue like a Wiper Lake around here, what would be our exposure? He said low. So not legal advice, but offhand legal advice. So I thought that was a good takeaway from that conference. Another one was, there was a great building trust kind of exercise that we did. Lisa Hins from the U of M, pretty interesting for any organization that staff or anybody would want to go through a building trust exercise. It was neat. I learned some good stuff there. And then lastly, on somebody had asked the question about the kind of managers using personal emails versus work emails versus blah, 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 blah. And the good takeaway I took was the district should have, and I don't know if we do, if it's in the governance manual, an incidental use policy that kind of just goes over things like emails and devices and what have you. If it's not in our governance manual or our handbook, we probably should maybe think about adding that. And we may want to even consider giving board managers a Prior Lake, Spring Lake Watershed District web email address. That's the cleanest, that's the safest, there's no ambiguity. Not saying we have to, but it may be something we might want to consider. And lastly, Diane is, as a district administrator, is a public official for the district, but none of the other staff are. So that means something in the legalities of the world, and I thought it was good to share. Thank you.
Thank you. Others? Anybody else? Bruce?
Yeah, I went to the same conference as Charlie, and there was some really good stuff there. That the lady that did the building trust from, she was from the University of Minnesota, Lisa Heinz, I think her name, very energetic, gets people really engaged, so she was good. Another good, and I didn't go to this one, I don't believe, but I got the information, good board staff relationship building. There was a good article on that. And then finally, I went to the Water District Finance Basics and Statutes between a lawyer and Kevin Bagalki, who's the Bowser Assistant Director. There was some really good information there on financing projects and how to operate and some of the legalities. So, but overall, it was a good conference.
Great. Thank you. Kurt?
One of the processes, it happened again, and I've complained about this, and they did it at this conference too, is they started taking questions in the middle of presentations. So what happens? There's so many questions, and people keep firing questions and wanting to hear themselves talk, in my opinion, that the presentation doesn't get done. And at the very end, as you two colleagues that were with me know, that it was rushed, and they didn't get through like 20% of the final material just because they burned time on people asking miscellaneous questions throughout the presentation. Don't do that. Do them at the end, then people can ask all the questions they want afterwards. But don't do it because it ruins the flow of the presentation. Please keep that in mind. Thank you.
Thank you. So the next item, the upcoming meeting and events. Oh, you had one, Fred?
On Friday, I was at the MOD Resolutions Committee, and the resolution that the board adopted regarding representation on, and I didn't bring the documents, Diane, so help me if I get it wrong, the TEP Committee, so that we participate in projects as an equal member, was adopted by MOD and forwarded to the MOD board. So it will go to the membership if the board agrees next at the annual conference in Alexandria.
Clarifying, that's the technical evaluation panel.
Thank you.
That's the one I think Maggie once told us about. Great, thank you. Okay, so we have 3 upcoming meetings. We have a CAC meeting in Prior Lake City Hall, October 22nd, 6:30 to 8 p.m. We have the Prior Lake Association's annual meeting on October 24th at the VFW. And the CWCU, which stands for
Clean Water Cleanup.
Clean Water Cleanup, 1027, The Woods at the Wilds Park, 9 to 11:30 a.m. Anything else? Seeing none, then I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Motion and second on the floor. All those in favor say aye. Aye. That motion carries. Thank you, everybody. Good night.
You want a picture?
Yep.